Welcome to today's lecture on advanced political psychology and international security dynamics. Today, we examine how individual leadership, psychology, group dynamics, and decision-making structures impact grand strategy and alliance stability. The primary purpose of this lecture is academic, using a theoretical framework. We analyze how psychological profiles and internal mechanisms affect international alliances and constitutional order. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with fellow scholars of international relations and political criminology, theoretical framework, political psychology, and international relations. Scope and methodology. This lecture provides an academic analysis of a state's leadership behavior, administrative dynamics, and diplomatic ramifications, using political psychology, realism in international relations, criminological profiling, and group dynamics. Part 1. The recall of the ambassador and strategic crisis. The unexpected return of the South Korean ambassador to the United States on July 15, 2026, signals a systemic breakdown in bilateral trust, indicating that retaliatory measures between allies have reached a critical tipping point. Warnings from Washington reflect pressure across three key domains. 1. Economic and commercial retaliation. U.S. policy-making bodies across the White House, Congress, and the USTR view punitive measures against U.S. firms e.g. Coupang and digital platform regulations under the Information and Communications Network Act as targeted suppression and unfair trade practices. Super 301 investigation. The USTR's formalization of Section 301 investigations signals imminent economic sanctions rather than mere diplomatic discontent. Institutional alignment. Coordinated actions by the U.S. House Committee on the Judiciary and the White House demonstrate a unified posture across U.S. government branches. 2. Degradation of intelligence sharing. A critical breach occurred following the unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence regarding high-enriched uranium (HEU) facilities by the Unification Minister, fracturing core alliance intelligence mechanisms. U.S. intelligence restrictions. U.S. agencies such as the CIA likely initiated protocols to restrict strategic intelligence, SIGINT, HUMINT. The ambassador returned to prevent security paralysis after receiving notifications that sensitive intelligence sharing regarding North Korea would be curtailed. 3. Ideological warnings from the U.S. State Department. Explicit warnings from the U.S. State Department regarding media regulations highlighted concerns over censorship and free expression. Washington no longer views the administration as a value-sharing democratic ally, reverting to diplomatic postures, historically reserved for authoritarian regimes. Part 2. Group dynamics and strategic bureaucratic bypass. Upon arriving in Seoul, the ambassador strategically bypassed an immediate private audience with the head of state, conducting sequential consultations with key cabinet officials, including the Unification Minister, NSC members, the Minister of Trade, Industry, and Energy, and the Chairman of the Fair Trade Commission. 1. Navigating executive confirmation bias. The executive exhibits narcissistic traits, rigid cognitive bias regarding personal policy frameworks, and extreme intolerance for dissenting views. Direct delivery of unvarnished warnings risked triggering defensive mechanisms, leading to the ambassador's immediate dismissal or a complete rejection of rational policy adjustment. 2. Countering bureaucratic groupthink. Cabinet officials surrounding the executive display classic groupthink, characterized by hyper-compliance to top-down directives. By engaging department heads individually, the ambassador aimed to inject external realities, such as tariffs and intelligence, blackouts, directly into the bureaucracy, to build internal momentum for policy correction. 3. Targeted consultation objectives. Security line, NSC, and unification, communicating the severity of the intelligence, breach and mandating adjustments to inter-Korean policy to restore alliance trust. Economic line trade and energy, addressing stalled $350 billion U.S. Investment commitments from major conglomerates such as Samsung and SK, and prioritizing international obligations over domestic political directives. Regulatory line, Fair Trade Commission, and ICT, conveying the urgency of impending Section 301 actions and establishing administrative exits, such as regulatory delays or policy modifications, regarding targeted corporate fines. Part 3. Psychological Profiling and Antisocial Behavioral Patterns. A criminological and psychological assessment of the executive reveals behavioral patterns rooted in developmental trauma, hypercompensation, and dark triad personality traits. 1. Overcompensation for developmental trauma. Early economic deprivation, lack of formal education, and childhood labor created deep internal insecurities. In power, these anxieties manifest as hypercompensation, aggression, and control. Uncontrolled verbal hostility toward family members points to emotional regulation vulnerabilities. Narcissistic reassurance, summoning leaders of major industrial conglomerates to force domestic reallocations, serves as an external display of absolute authority, attempting to erase past feelings of powerlessness by controlling powerful economic entities. 2. Micromanagement and compulsive control. The leader exhibits an unusual impulse to personally control micro-level domestic matters ranging from delivery app pricing and subscription cancellations to sanitary product pricing and university meal plans. Substitutive control mechanism. International isolation and foreign policy friction generate internal helplessness. The leader counteracts this by exercising intense authority over everyday domestic matters to stabilize a fragile self-concept. Populist polarization, framing consumers of premium goods as privileged and positioning basic consumer goods as public assets, reflects a classic psychological tactic designed to divide society into binary in-groups and out-groups for political mobilization. 3. Dark triad traits and criminological profiling. Involvement in municipal development scandals, illicit financial transfers to hostile states, and the unexplained deaths of 8 associated key figures provide analytical markers for Machiavellianism and psychopathy. Utilitarian view of subordinates. The recurring pattern of key operational figures suffering fatal outcomes during judicial inquiries suggests an instrumental view of human beings, treating personnel as disposable assets for political survival. Above-the-law mentality. Historical reliance on unusual legal interpretations, alongside structural efforts to alter the judiciary, such as expanding the Supreme Court bench, reflects an antisocial sense of omnipotence, where the legal order is viewed as an instrument to be rewritten rather than obeyed. Part 4. Structural erosion of state architecture. The regime's governance model presents an extreme case of authoritarian populism, characterized by the erosion of institutional checks and balances and the personalization of state power. 1. Institutional capture and degradation of the rule of law. To insulate the executive from personal legal risks, state legal infrastructure is effectively held hostage. Legislative initiatives designed to penalize prosecutors and judges, combined with ideological packing of the judiciary, transform the rule of law into rule by law, subjugating the judicial branch to executive authority. 2. Security vacuums and military depoliticization. Proposals to merge service academies, relocate military institutions, and suspend border surveillance operations systematically weaken defense readiness. Security infrastructure is thus repurposed to serve domestic political narrative construction at the expense of national defense capabilities. 3. Market distortion via executive coercion. directing major semiconductor and technology firms to divert massive investment capital to specific political strongholds, devoid of essential industrial infrastructure. It represents a violation of free market governance, infringing upon corporate operational autonomy and shareholder rights. 4. Diplomatic isolation and realist consequences. While maintaining strict domestic control, the administration faces systemic isolation internationally, refusals of standard diplomatic protocols, and minimal engagement during multilateral summits demonstrate that foreign governments recognize these operational anomalies. The failure to anticipate international reactions evidenced by proceeding with restrictive media, legislation, and corporate fines, until Section 301 retaliation became imminent, illustrates a fundamental misunderstanding of international relations realism. Domestic political coercion does not translate to international power. Instead, it generates self-damaging consequences on the global stage. The current governance architecture represents an unhealthy combination of fragile personal psychology, an intense drive for power, and uncompromising Machiavellian methods. To compensate for early vulnerabilities, the leader seeks absolute control over micro-level domestic details while altering legal and security structures to deflect personal liabilities. The sudden return of the ambassador serves as a clear indicator of this friction, an administrative system driven by distorted psychological motives, colliding with the realities of global norms and alliance commitments. This case offers a compelling example of how individual psychological pathology, when combined with the misuse of state power, can compromise a nation's security and standing. To conclude our analysis, we offer a profound philosophical critique of such governance models by turning to an ancient Oriental maxim from the classical text Guanzi, 礼义廉耻，国之四维，治夷不彰，国乃灭亡. Propriety, righteousness, integrity, and a sense of shame are the four main pillars of a state. If these four pillars are not upheld, the state will inevitably fall into ruin. When a nation's leadership casts aside basic decorum, 礼, undermines institutional justice, 义, abandons personal and administrative integrity, and completely loses its capacity for self-reflection and shame, 可, the foundational pillars of the state crumble. A political system that operates without moral self-restraint or respect for the rule of law may temporarily wield coercive power, but history demonstrates that such systems inevitably fracture under the weight of internal decay and international isolation. Thank you for joining today's academic seminar. If you found this structural analysis insightful, please remember to like, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming lectures. Please share your thoughts and questions in the comments.